Okay, hello everyone, and welcome today to our reality series, episode 4, where we're going to talk about managing your brand voice with generative AI. And today we have with us Olga Beregovaya, the VP of AI and Machine Translation here at SmartLink, and we have Jen Wong, head of our AI product strategy. So thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
So, all right, let's jump into it and talk about our first myth of the day. So, myth number 1, you cannot manage brand tone and voice with AI. And Olga, I will give it over to you to kick things off about the myths and realities about this statement.
Yes, I mean, most definitely this is a myth. And most definitely, if anything, AI is at your service to manage brand tone and voice. And there are a couple of ways we could approach it. First of all, let's start with machine translation. Machine translation has been customizable since the dawn of the days. That's English. Even from the years of rule-based machine translation, you could feed additional terms of all parts of speech into the lexicon and use the transfer system to translate with more client tone and voice and in domain language. Then if we fast forward to the years of SMT, then it became really easily customizable. It took a very long time to customize rule-based systems. But then customizing statistical systems definitely became easier because that's when you started using your linguistic assets. And that's when translation memories really became much more of training corpus for machine translation than just production translation memory. Not to underminish the value of translation memory in production. And this is where we started to be able to use do not translates and terminology. Now, in the modern time of day of neural machine translation, first things first, neural machine translation and customizable neural machine translation are not going anywhere, or at least no time soon. We still see results with NMT that are often superior to what you can see with just using generative AI as a translation engine. And when you train your machine translation engines, we still see a very healthy uplift of like 25% to 30% in both blue score points and TR, translation error rate, or translation edit rate. So the value of customization is there. And you definitely can do a lot of things with AI to protect and to promote your brand. Now, why not just terminology? Why also both terminology and translation memories? If you think about it, if you inject terminology, you just learn a noun or at best noun phrase because it's good hygiene to remove your verbs and often your adjectives from your terminology list. But from translation memory, you actually learn much more context and you learn much longer phrases. So this is where you actually capture the actual tone and voice. And the glossary, the dictionary, do not translate is where you capture more of your brand terminology, and obviously stylistic preferences. And I know that later we'll touch a lot on what you can do with large language models, but now there is this whole other thing of language model knows what it knows, but there are a lot of ways you can fine tune large language model to actually learn from a subset of your translation memories and from your glossaries, how you actually want your language model to perform and to translate. Not to mention automated post-editing, where you can do way more with further polishing what you can do with AI. So definitely a myth, definitely to be busted. Jen, if you want to add to this.
Yeah, of course. And definitely on that note, kind of the use of different things like glossary insertion or formality in changing machine translation has been around for a little while already, and it's only been enhanced recently with the introduction of LLMs. So previously, you could always do glossary insertion just after or during machine translation to insert it. Different engines provide different possibilities in order to do this. But for that instance, you actually have to create your own glossary that is strictly for use in machine translation, right? Like Olga mentioned, You can't do things, I mean, you can do limited things with adjectives or verbs, but of course, depending on the languages you're translating into, there needs to be quite a lot of, you know, post editing in that aspect, because it's not so much like a search and replace. You kind of really have to make sure that the terms really fit into the flow of the content that you're writing. So glossary insertion has been around for a while, but now with the introduction of LLMs, you can actually just do more. You can add more different types of glossary terms or phrases into the glossary that you want to insert. And large language models can help you smooth that out a little bit more, to kind of bring that machine translation to the next level. But it's not just about glossary. I mean, that's one thing that's very common and very often talked about. But there are other types of linguistics, styles, and assets that we can actually start using to enhance machine translation, to incorporate brand tone and voice, things like formality, things like modality, different like aspects of translations that you have to think about when you're actually looking at languages. What we know is that, with things like formality and modality, it's never a 1 to 0 kind of thing. It's never going to be like black and white. So it was very difficult to incorporate into machine translation previously. If you just think about it, formality is not just formal and informal. You have different levels of formality. How formal you are to a judge is going to be different to how formal you are to a potential employer or the CEO of your company, right? You're not going to talk to them the same way, but they're both considered formal. So it's really like looking at this gradient and evolution of how we expect linguistic assets and linguistic styles to be translated into machine translation is really what we're looking into, and what LLMs are helping us do nowadays. We can further investigate it and give more instructions and a little bit more feedback to different models, different AI, technology, to really enhance machine translation for brand, tone, and voice, to incorporate all of that. And I think right now it's not so much about can we do it. I don't think it's so much about using our current linguistic assets there. I think the bigger question is the linguistic assets we have right now enough? Is this exactly how we need to tell different AI technology, either ML models or large language models, how to transform and kind of improve our machine translation to incorporate brand, tone, and voice? Maybe we can think big now. I mean, the world is open. We never knew this was going to happen. Like a year ago, things were very different. And yeah, it's very interesting because you can already start thinking about it, not in the context of, hey, linguistic styles include formality, modality, glossary terms, abbreviations, punctuation marks. You can think about it from the perspective of the people writing the content now, in terms of, I am a company that wants to kind of have this type of brand voice, and who exactly is the person that I'm talking to? Who are the different segments or customer groups that I'm talking to? And really cater the localization of this content towards certain people and certain characteristics. Like people in marketing and sales teams and product teams don't think about it like, oh, well, I need to make sure that we have this type of glossary term and this type of formality. They're like really at the beginning of the exploration of how you want to localize, like this is the target group. And then maybe we can actually start looking in that direction and broaden up exactly what it means to have brand, tone, and voice incorporated into machine translation.
If I can add to this, I was actually speaking to a group of CMOs, chief marketing officers, and the sentiment was, what is brand? Brand is not just tone and voice. Brand is also the user experience and emotional engagement, emotional and intellectual engagement on the part of your target audiences, and ability of the brand to drive emotional engagement and drive the impact. I guess the impact is one of the words for the for persona-based customization. I just wanted to add something that I did not say before about linguistic assets, that maybe we can take a step back. We often hear from our customers here at SmartLink, like, hey, we just moved to SmartLink, but we do know that our TMs are not in the best shape, and there could be inconsistencies between translation memories and glossaries. So what we also do, and I think what's also essential when it comes to brand protection with AI, you really want to curate your linguistic assets. You really want to harmonize terminology with your TMs. When you prepare TMs, be it for LLM tuning or be it for machine translation training, there are quite a few things that you want to do. You want to say deduplicate, you want to flag ambiguities. There are a lot of times where like there's so much dichotomy, you don't even know what's right, what's wrong. And luckily, there are a lot of AI ways you can actually mitigate that. One other little thing, it's all awesome about large language models. We're equally excited and work with large language models equally as much as probably many of from our audience here. It's also about the ROI, right? And when you could train machine translation engines and just feed the minimum of 10,000 translation units, roughly 100,000 words into NMT engine, you do this, next thing you know, you're like a pretty significant dollar amount down. So what's also very important is the ability and techniques to prune your linguistic assets to pick what's best to customize with large language models. And there are definitely very not subtle, but very significant differences with what you can do when you fine tune your LLM or design your prompts and what you can do with machine translation. Both are winning approaches, but I think we need to be very, very mindful of the cost and of the spend.
Okay, great. Thank you. We're going to move into our second myth, which is large language models like GPT can solve it all with simple prompting. So looking at it as in the one size fits all.
Okay, maybe I can take it and then kick it off and then pass it on to Jen.
Sure.
So yes, we do see a lot of, and we do get a lot of questions from our customers, and we see a bit of a sentiment in the industry, like, right, and Jen already said it, right, make it formal, or hey, make it informal. Yeah, it will take care of it, but it will also only, like a simple one-line prompt will only take care of it to an extent. It is not going to capture any nuances. And the devil is in the detail. We just ran an experiment internally with various degrees of formalities for, say, Japanese language. And there is absolutely no way under the sun you can actually tackle all the formality scenarios for this language, depending on the situation, who you talk to, with a simple one line, hey, make it formal. Not going to do the trick. Or make it gender appropriate. What is it? Like, it's a doctor, male doctor in one sentence, but then it's a female doctor in the second sentence, or it's a male and a female doctor within a single sentence. What are you going to do with that? So one size fits all is definitely not the way to go. And all our experimentation with like quick one-liner just does not do it. There is the other part to it, which is the model only knows what it knows, right? What has been fed into it. So there definitely needs to be that. Like, we also hear sometimes, like in the old days of machine translation, hey, we're just going to drop in Google Translate plugin and solve our company issues with translation once and for all. It's like, okay, yes, but what are you going to do with your product names? What are you going to do with your stylistic choices? And it's very, very much the same with like, hey, we're just going to drop in an OpenAI or now other LLM providers plug in and run with this, and off we go. And then we immediately catch ton of cases that this simple drop it in, one size fits all just does not catch. So one size fits all is definitely, it's a silver bullet. No. Is it gonna solve all of our problems? No. And definitely there is a need for much more nuanced techniques before you can actually deploy GPT. And this is where strong recommendation would be, there is always a global content partner there for you, or an in-house SME, but there's got to be somebody who really mastered the art of implementing large language models. The other thing is, again, large language models, unless and until you actually start fine-tuning them or customizing them, they are built on the world's knowledge, right? They are built on all of the internet and basically all the data available. And what does it mean? Sometimes the world knowledge can be biased, and sometimes it can just not be fit for purpose. So definitely, most definitely, I think we're very passionate about this myth here. It is not binary. It is not just like, hey, it works and it's gonna solve for my problems. And to add to this, one last thing. I think everybody in our audience, or definitely all of us here, have been exposed to factual inaccuracies that an LLM can produce. I learned a lot of interesting things about myself. For instance, when I did a vanity prompt, did not render what I thought I was. But I mean, even just vanity searches aside, you often see, and even more so in languages other than English, and there is a reason for that, that the model just gives completely factually inaccurate result. And again, you need both human in the loop and automation techniques to mitigate that. So I'll see what Jen would want to add to this.
Yeah, and kind of picking up on that note, really simple prompting can lead to results, but of course, when you're talking about content that your brand is, putting out to the public or to your customers, there's something that you kind of have to watch out for and be careful for brand protection, right? Because especially with the fact, like Olga mentioned, with this hallucination that LLMs can do, you wouldn't want any kind of bias or toxic content entering. Like the LLM models don't really understand this. They're just kind of producing content for you based on what you've told them. And I think a bigger thing is all the stuff that you didn't tell them not to do. Especially if you do simple prompting, there's a lot of things you might not have said. It doesn't know that you don't want these things in there. I mean, of course, nobody wants this type of content, to be to be added to their translations, but it can damage your brand if you're not careful with it. And that's something that we kind of actively look at here at Smartling, because there's the notion of toxic MT, toxic AI. These things are going to happen. It's a matter of kind of using that human in the loop to make sure that you catch all these instances, to make sure that you even use prompting to actually mitigate all the possibilities for biased or toxic content from entering your translations. It would be very harmful for everybody. In addition to that, I mean, in order to do these things, you really need tooling around prompt development, what we call prompt engineering. I think everybody's heard of this term already. So, prompt engineering, in order to not only ensure higher quality translations, to mitigate risks, and to ensure better brand tone and voice, but also to mitigate all these things of bias or toxic content. Internally, we've developed prompt engineering tools so that we can actually test it actively, test any prompt that we produce. They're usually never simple prompts, because we see a lot of things when we test it on different types of content. We want to make sure that everything is protected, that only the best results come out, and that we try to reduce the possibility of any type of hallucination, good or not. I mean, you don't want additional content that you didn't write in your content, of course, and to reduce the risk of bias and toxic content. And this kind of opened the door. What we found internally is it opened the door for linguists to look at content and to work with content in a different manner, because it's no longer really about string per string or work with a customer or a group of content that you work with. You're really kind of trying to work with the prompt engineering tool to create things that are valid across the board. And it's a real big challenge for our linguists. They're doing really well. It's a new field. It's something new that's like kind of a new job and a new direction that linguists are heading into. And a lot of them are very excited about this. I mean, imagine the ability to kind of have your edits kind of propagated throughout all the translations instead of waiting for machine translation to give you something to take a look at. It's kind of the ability to affect content before it's even translated. So we can probably say that linguist jobs are going to evolve in the future with the development and like higher usage of large language models in the translation process, especially in the automated post-editing, especially in terms of how to get that glossary, like going back to the first topic, how to get those glossary terms in, how to get that brand voice and tone, the emotional connection you can create with your customers, and even kind of the way you actually want the external public and your customers to perceive your brand. Linguists are going to eventually evolve to become a partner for most of our brands and become similar to brand ambassadors, like prompt writing brand ambassadors, individualized and customized prompts for every type of situation and every use case that our customers would have.
Yeah,
So
just
yeah, it basically allows you to, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead, Jen. Go ahead,
Sorry.
Jen. I just had one quick comment. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was just about to say it. It even allows you to not only reach customers on an emotional level, but you have the ability to kind of hyper localize your content, because with prompting, you can actually enable machine translations to be produced much faster with a specific type of brand and tone in mind. And then you can actually start to hyper localize. You don't have to go for just like one big market. You can specify in a specific market, hey, this customer group, that customer group in this region for the specific use case. Okay, that's it from my side. I don't know if Olga has anything to add for this.
Yes, and yeah, I just had one quick comment about the linguist in engagement. I think it's also essential, and we also observed it in the machine translation time. Any kind of like reward system where the linguist sees immediately, to Jen's point, the
Mm-hmm.
results of their work. I think just from the engagement perspective, it is essential that the linguist is a part of the process, a part of the solution, as opposed to like, hey, here is the solution thrown over the fence to me, and I am just deal with it, and I'm just an appendix to the machine. And it's absolutely not the case. A linguist being apart from the solution end to end and being an equal partner, I think it's essential in terms of just job satisfaction, if anything else. So that was just my quick comment to I agree with everything that Jen said there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is segueing into the third myth um, perfectly, and the third myth being that neural machine translation, human post editing, trend creation, human translation, these main pillars that we look at today, that those are all, as we know them, they are here to stay. So kind of Olga, building off of what you just said, I will let you continue with that thought.
Okay, thanks so much. So I think we would be extremely naive to even for a second allow that we will be able to run in our translation, localization, global content transformation industry, will be able to run business as usual. This is just, I mean, it could be reality maybe for the next, I don't know, 6 months or a year, but the industry is most definitely reinventing itself. I don't think the industry has ever reinvented itself at this pace. Obviously, we had milestones, right? We had computer assisted translation. We had like suddenly we had translation memories. Suddenly we had machine translation. But where we are right now with generative AI, that's something that I don't think the industry has seen before. So maybe we could just dissect your question into pieces. So will NMT be the same? They'll definitely, the NMT research, that's our crystal ball here at SmartLink. The NMT research will most definitely continue. And the NMT models, and even more so, probably multilingual models, will definitely continue to be developed. No question there. But Jen already alluded to the point of APE, automated post editing. And what we see and where we see it going is you get the best of both worlds. You know that neural machine translation is excellent at facts and doesn't do things like, switching negative for skipping negation, switching negative for positive. But we also know that LLMs are doing exceptionally well with fluency. So why don't you let both parts do what they can do? But neural machine translation in isolation is definitely a thing of the past. So I think both researchers and practitioners are equally aware of that, equally aware of this ecosystem where the both parts of the equation complement themselves. So that's one. Let's go to next one was post editing, right? Human post editing of any kind of automated translation output. First things first, I think even the term MTPE is kind of losing its appeal in the industry and is not even probably a modern term. We're talking much more about the companionship and the human in the loop and human and machine complementing each other. I think the biggest paradigm shift was before we were talking about computer assisted translation. Now we're really talking about we let AI do a lot of heavy lifting, ensure consistency, right, take care of what AI can already do, and even more so will be able to do. But the role of the human validator and human annotator is not going anywhere. But we're really talking much more about human in the loop, about validation. I think that's the new big word in the industry, and often managing by exception. And I think where AI has become exceptionally good is there are two trails there. Like, you improve the quality of your translation, and you improve the way you can assess and evaluate your translation automatically. So I think both parts actually, so human in the loop is one part, but also managing by exception, because AI and in often in the it can be equal an ensemble approach with just large language models alone. AI already made some predictions for you, what to look at, what to look at less, and what potentially for certain content types to skip altogether. And the last one, two, DTP, desktop publishing. That's the hugest thing actually on my mind. For instance, what's going to happen to DTP now with multi-model models? You can actually generate text in target language. So is it goodbye to I don't know, SVG files? There's a goodbye to in-text extraction. Is it really goodbye to the DTP as we know it? And I think our strong answer is yes, you can do way more with context. Transcreation, huge one. Prompting, samples, few shot examples, you can actually generate target copy. So I think the world of digital marketing as we know it is definitely going to be reinvented itself. So I would have a hard time even imagining which part of localization industry is not going to be impacted by the advancements in AI and generative AI in particular. So that's I think that would be our prediction of the day.
Yeah, I think just to build upon Olga's points there, I think I agree with everything she mentioned. I mean, we see a shift of all the different types of kind of services that the language localization industry has provided over the years to shift the level up, to incorporate more and more AI technology in order to be streamlined, in order to make content more consistent, in order to include more, bringing it back to including more customer brand, tone, and voice. With the shift of machine translation already kind of being augmented through automated post editing, and especially LLM and AI empowered augmented machine translations, the shift of MTPE to human in the loop and management by exception, or like editing by exception, shift of human translations to be AI aided translations and transcreation for the validation of actual generated content with generative AI. I think the bigger question that the industry has been looking at in the past already and will continue to further investigate, and I think it's becoming more and more important, is what type of content should fit for which purpose, especially with the ability of AI to actually, imbue more machine translation with better context awareness and linguistic styling. I think you can do much more than what we thought we could do before. Before, machine translation was very limited in terms of the application, especially direct machine translation was limited in the application of where you should do this. I think this can be expanded. So it's about this content shift through the different types of services that linguists can offer. It's going to be really different. I mean, linguists are now going to be involved in every part, in everything, because of this entire idea of prompt engineering, in order to make machine translation just that much better, in order to allow content to be handled differently, and in order to allow content to be generated, without having specifically to be directly translated. Going back to that point of becoming partners and brand ambassadors with different corporations, companies, organizations. I think that's kind of the questions that we're looking at the moment.
Maybe I could add to
Yeah.
this a little bit. I think it's also a matter of trust when it comes to the brand
Mhm.
preservation and brand promotion. What we also see is because AI is becoming more and more advanced, and both predictions and generated text are becoming more and more accurate, there is much more trust on the part of the global brands to actually trust with more content to go through AI powered processes. And I think it's very interesting that the domains that were maybe even a couple of years ago, there were definitely domains, there were definitely verticals that were very cautious about deploying AI for compliance reasons or really just for brand protection reasons. I think we're gaining much more trust. And that's driven by the fact that AI is improving and the role of AI in brand promotion is growing because people see positive outcomes from the deployment, and that really elevates, or the adoption of AI for brand protection and promotion purposes is growing exponentially. I think trust is really a really big word in modern time and day. And maybe to add to this one last
Great.
thing, and we definitely see it in the changes in the translation mix on the part of our customers. We do see that close to 50% of our customers' content actually is going through machine translation now, and the portion that goes to direct HT as we know it is shrinking. But the good news is there definitely is a portion of human in the loop. There is definitely like good 20-25% of human in the loop where we definitely need human validation and definitely need review. AI is great, but AI is not perfect, and there's got to be this step of risk mitigation. So that's I think Jen touched
Yeah.
on it when we spoke about what linguistic jobs are going to look like from the brand ambassador perspective.
Yeah, and I think that what you just said, Olga, is partially answers, but we got a question in from Grace who asks, do you foresee any changes to the linguistic quality assurance process? And just as you mentioned, I imagine we will still need humans to assess the quality of text intended for other humans, but do you think AI will have a role in this process?
Jen, you want to go? I can as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
I can.
Love this topic. I actually really do like this topic. But things are going to be different. I think, honestly, it's a lot more focus on linguistic quality assurance because it closes the loop. AI and machine learning is as strong as the information you feed it. Like what we mentioned, LLMs only know what they know because that's what they were told to learn off of. And by actually closing the loop, you're able to kind of contribute more information and we're able to build different models based on quality assurance information in order to ensure higher quality translations. So I think that's definitely one part that I see moving a lot, like having a lot more focus. And the other part would probably be in kind of quality um, assessment and being able to evaluate things that you see as um, requiring additional um, editing or review to ensure specific quality concerns that come up with machine translation. Sorry, what that really means from my perspective is this whole human in the loop, management by exception, quality evaluation by exception can really start to take part instead of trying to LQA everything because that's a very expensive process in itself. You can actually start to focus in on the content that you know would benefit the most from LQA. Olga,
Maybe
do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. So for thought one, I completely second what you said about the TEP, right? Translation, editing, proofreading, as we know it. That definitely seems to be becoming more and more a thing of the past. And we see the results because human in the loop, in a nutshell, is an editorial process already, because you are already editing and reviewing something that was already generated by the machine. And what we see is the quality of even the first pass is already high enough, unless you're dealing with very specialized content or content that requires transcreation. So the editorial step, the quality estimation of A, source, B, machine output, and the quality predictions by machine learning models are already a great indicator of where you do or do not need that second pair of eyes. So that definitely a huge paradigm shift for sure. I want to mention another thing, and again, not to undermine the role of the humans. If we talk about MQM, right? MQM being the quality, the holy grail of the industry, the quality metric that everybody's using to benchmark against. The beauty of it is you can equally evaluate machine translation and human translation and human editing of automated translation output. Now there actually are ways and pretty successful experiments around automatically generating MQM scores. So we definitely see some of the future of human annotation and human LQAs shifting towards automated MQM. Having said that, you really still need something to train your MQM models, and you really need to give human examples, and you still need human reference to actually even know if what you've generated and what you've labeled and what you've assessed automatically is accurate. So the data is as much, where we say data is golden, right? From the times of like when the first big data, the notion of big data was introduced, human data is becoming even more golden than it ever was. The more human reference you have, the more you can actually achieve with automation, now specifically applied to quality assessment going forward.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have another question from Andrea, and I think, Olga, this will be a great question for you. How do you deal with the limited knowledge of LLMs in low resource languages? Do you just fall back to traditional neural MT and human revision?
I would say that it is a challenge, and every day or almost every week we see an announcement about the new large language model released that is specifically targeting long tail languages and lower resourced languages. So, there is definitely evolution in the world of large language models that is very mindful of under resourced languages. So, that's one. I think one thing is just there is much more attention being paid to languages outside of English and languages outside of your standard set of FIGS, APAC, Slavic, Finno-Ugric. So that's definitely one thing. The other thing is there are still often cases, and I think it's a known thing, there are often cases that you really are much better off with going with neural machine translation. Possibly an LLM will have enough capabilities for smoothing of under-resourced languages. But quite often the recommendation would really be, okay, the model doesn't know anything. And even if you now in the modern time and day, you don't need to pivot through English, but still there are a lot of cases where neural machine translation would still be the winning choice.
Okay, great. We also had a question come in from Anthony, and while we're not going to be showing demonstrations of the SmartLing platform on this webinar, he does ask about some of the best practices that SmartLing recommends for SmartLing jobs and when we're implementing linguistic assets, brand, tone, even expressiveness, etc. So either of you could share some of the best practices that SmartLing puts forth for our linguists.
Jen, you want to take this one, or we can try and tackle it together? Maybe you could kick it off and see how I can contribute. So basically, yeah, best practices for linguists, and I guess equally for end customers in terms of how to best manage tone and voice within our and stylistic preferences within the platform.
Mm-hmm. Right now, we have definitely improved our linguistic assets on our side of the platform. The ability to kind of really review and update your linguistic assets. We're continuously making improvements there. I think the most important thing is to really fill out the linguistic assets information, especially kind of any job information that you want specific to something that you're trying to process within one of our workflows. The style guides are definitely a linguist tools that actually they actively use consistently, right? Because otherwise, how can they tell? There's no way for them to really understand exactly what you're looking for. So a lot of our linguists actively use our style guide. We have been making improvements there. In on the product team, on the product side, and we're currently investigating new ways to do it so that it can actually work with large language models and AI. um, I think the best recommendation that I could give, besides the information in our help center, is really being very explicit in terms of who you're trying to talk to, what kind of content you're trying to provide, and um, a little bit of background and guidance in that aspect will really help linguists understand the context of where this is going to be used, who it's going to be for, and what kind of linguistic styles they should actually apply when they're looking at the translations themselves for the current moment. Once we get more into the direction, so we're still investigating a few things in terms of how to incorporate it so that it can be used actively with large language models. I think then things are actually going to change. So we're kind of a little bit on this in between stage at the moment right now. Um, does that answer your question, Anthony? Or Olga, do you have anything to add there?
Actually, I wanted to add a couple of things. I mean, when Jen,
Mhm.
you mentioned all the work that we're doing around large language models, we are very much opposed to the integrate and pray approach, right? Just throw it in and I mean, back to one line prompts and just like, integrate and declare, okay, hey, we've integrated LLMs. We really believe in nuances. So going forward, you will see much more from us in terms of giving you tools and helping you address the nuances of your content and stylistic preferences of your content. But I mean, I'm not saying we're going to spend 3 years in the lab. We have a very firm roadmap and we have certain things that have already been deployed, but we are working on making sure to deliver the best experience to the linguist to get most actionable and relevant outcome. The other thing I wanted to mention is if you're deploying, and we definitely encourage you to deploy our machine translation solution because there are a lot of amazing AI things in our neural machine translation hub and our language AI overall approach to language AI. What we've developed is ability to prepare dictionaries specifically for machine translation that help machine translation. And Jen, obviously you are the product guru in this conversation, that help machine translation use what works best with MC systems. So if you are deploying machine translation, we would strongly recommend engage us to prepare a machine translation specific dictionary for you, machine translation specific glossary, and then you can get the best from us being able to address things that you want to handle, like do not translate and other proper names, or like something you want transliterated, or however you want us to handle your brand terminology. Because as we said earlier, native dictionaries have quite a bit of, they're perfect for translation and localization, but they have quite a bit of noise when it comes to working with machine translation engines. And that's something that we're already doing. Don't know, Jen, if you would want to add to this or agree with me or disagree with me.
Oh yeah, 100% agree. Having dedicated glossaries right now for our NMT hub can really improve the content that's going to be output by the machine translation. We've worked really, put a lot of testing behind the NMT hub and all the APE features. Like Olga mentioned, we really kind of tested until it's pretty solid before we're actually ready for release. Yeah.
Great. Well, we are just coming up to the end of time, so that is all we have time for today. But thank you again, Olga and Jen, for joining us. Thank you to everyone who attended, and we will see you next time. And I dropped a link in the chat if you want to join us in August for episode 5. So thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks,